Here from GP Santa Clara. Hello and welcome back to coverage here at Grand Prix Santa Clara. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with Eduardo Sachkovic, and we've got lined up in our feature match here right now Frank Skarren, Skarren-Manfield-Braun-Duin sitting at 2-0. Across from them, Alexander Wilson, Timothy Abbott, and Nathan Kahovec. They are all lined up. And I got to say, they got to be a little bit like, facing a pretty stacked team here in round number 3.
Right. And actually that happens a lot when you're, I think, coming to these tournaments and you face one like the top players. You can be like a little distracted, but at the end of the day, just play your best Magic. I think that's the approach. Yeah,
and even then, you might sit down and kind of roll your eyes or think, geez, really already here in round 3? But once you start playing lands, it doesn't matter. We're going to be starting off on our middle table. That is Modern, so you Modern fans kind of get your hit early here. And let's take a look. I don't believe that we've got deck lists quite yet.
It's fine. I think I know what this matchup is.
This looks like the deck that really kind of crushed the last Modern GP here. Some type of Titan.
So it looks like it's going to be playing Scapeshift and Primeval Titan. So the core strategy being to ramp up to 6 and play Primeval Titan, or 7 and Scapeshift dealing 18 damage. And in front, you have Seth Manfield playing the blue-white deck. And this is actually going to be really interesting because that deck can actually interact really well with what the... But like on a really weird axis with what the green-red ramp deck does, because they have access to Spreading Seas and Field of Ruin.
Okay. You see a Field of Ruin already on the battlefield here for Manfield, ready to kind of disrupt Timothy's game plan. This is Farseek, but you know what? Seth's going to say no, sir. He's going to fire off a Mana Leak on it. We know how important hitting land drops is for Timothy. No matter what, right? Whether it's through Farseek or just through hitting them in natural means, it really is a clock of land drops rather than anything else.
So like countering the Farseek here rather than waiting for a Primeval Titan or Scapeshift makes sense. With Scapeshift, they always have open mana, so Mana Leak is a lot worse. And you have access to counter spells like Cryptic Command and Snapcaster Mage that can get back the Mana Leak anyways. So it's better to just starve your opponent on lands if the play is available.
Now, if you were sitting in Timothy's seat, would this make you think that it is more likely that Seth has even another copy of Mana Leak in his hand since he was so eager to fire off that first one?
It might. I would just assume that my opponent just has access to at least 2 counter spells.
Okay.
Probably a Cryptic Commando if I was going to guess. So there was a Wood Elf there, right?
Wood Elves, gotcha.
Right. So this version plays Wood Elves. Most versions play roughly just the 8 Ramping Groves and Farseek and Secure Tribeller plus Search for Tomorrow. The Wood Elf is like the additional 1 or 2 last ones. What's interesting here in this match is that normally the blue-white deck uses Field of Ruin to disrupt their opponent's mana, but because the green-red Valakut deck has so many basic mountains, it doesn't mind essentially, it just gets a mountain. So the Field of Ruin is not the land disruption that it would be in other matchups, apart from killing a Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle.
All right, well, here's a big play for Seth Manfield. He's going to fire off Gideon, ally of Zendikar.
Yeah,
and of course, this is a monstrously fast clock if left unchecked. He can make a 2-2 and start attacking for 7 as early as next turn.
Right, so here Gideon, essentially, you need to put a fast clock on this Valakut deck from the blue-white side, mostly because, essentially, if you don't put a clock, the Valakut deck will eventually resolve one of their cards, because the... Okay.
Oh, so we've actually got a bit of an issue here. Taking a look at the deck list here, Eduardo, it looks like perhaps a clerical error here for Seth Manfield. What happened is he noticed, we thought, well, he's going to play this Gideon, but it looks like it's actually meant to be in his sideboard. It's not a main deck card for him.
Oh.
And he has probably called attention to that. Okay. And we're going to jump over to another game while they get that sorted out. But that's not good news for Seth Manfield. That is carries a penalty with it, generally speaking. So we'll let the judges sort that out, and we'll let you know what happened with it. But that could be a bad start here for the powerhouse team on the left-hand side of your screen. Let's see what's going on over here in Legacy. That's right, we are playing Legacy. This is team-constructed trios. We've got Standard, Modern, and Legacy. We don't get a chance to watch Legacy all that often, here at the GP level, but we do get to hear Eduardo. What is Brian Braun doing up to? It looks like he's got,
he's playing
Terminus in the graveyard. That leads me to think something, doesn't it?
I think it's called Neo Miracles, or I don't know what the exact deck name is, but essentially some people didn't want to give up their Miracle deck after Top was gone. So they're still playing Terminus. I believe most of these lists would play Predict, which I'll double check now.
Okay.
But on the other side, Nathan is playing. We know it's at least blue-green Delver. The Nimble Mongoose tells me that normally that's going to be the red version because Nimble Mongoose pairs well with Lightning Bolt since you can deal that early pressure. Yeah. Oh, okay. So we have a Terminus here.
A second Terminus, it looks like.
Yeah, so this looks like...
This one perhaps set up from a Brainstorm we see in the graveyard, though I'm not sure.
Yeah. We
see the other one may have also been, but it looks like Nathan is going to go ahead and counter it with Force of Will.
Right. Yeah.
Looks like he's got Portents in his deck as well. By the way, does Brian Braun-Duin?
Right. Okay. So
to predict 2 Portent.
Okay. So yeah, I'm actually excited to see Brian's list because there are some sweet cards which I'll talk about in a bit. Brian set up this Terminus with Force of Will backup, which was so that totally negates Nathan's pressure. And it's going to be a lot harder to rebuild. But I really liked seeing Brian's list because he has access to what I think is one of the most exciting modern cards to come out of Ixalan in Search for Askanta the Sunken Ruin. So essentially that card has seen a lot more Eternal play because it allows you to just pull massively ahead of your opponent once it flips.
That's right. And, it's interesting because it's so easy in in Modern and in Legacy to get cards into your graveyard. I mean, it's just trivially easy. They just flow into your yard.
Yeah.
Look at this game right here. We're still in this is what, turn 4? Look at their graveyards. They just get loaded up so quickly.
Yeah, they don't even need to do any work. They just cast their spells.
They just cast it, and
or their lands, as the case is, right? So, in Modern and Legacy, all these graveyard interaction cards are so much more powerful because you just need to play Magic. That's why Tarmogoyf was such a presence for so long. That's why Deathrite Shaman is so good in Legacy. Oh, by the way, Nathan passing the turn here means that Brian is probably incredibly far ahead.
Yeah, this is not good news. No threats whatsoever for Nathan. He had a fight, right? He had the 2 creatures. He had the Mongoose and the Tarmogoyf. He tried to protect them from the Terminus with Force of Will, but Force of Will coming right back at you means that Nathan is just out of gas and really needs to find a threat. Things looking pretty good for Brian Braun-Duin here.
Yeah, so I could see, by the way, Lightning Bolt in Nathan's hand. So, yeah, he is indeed on the Rug Delver deck. And he's going to try to resolve. So, yeah. But, yeah, Brian is really far ahead here. Basically, Brian's win conditions are Monastery Mentor, Jace the Mind Sculptor, and Snapcaster Mage. The Snapcaster is probably just to rebuy cards later in the game, like counter a Fret or just draw extra card with Brainstorm or Ponder. But, yeah, the Monastery Mentors can put the game ahead away really quickly since the Monks are actually a really good friend against Nathan, although Nathan has access to Lightning Bolt. I think the most likely scenario for this game is Brian will win it, and will win it with Jace. By Fate Sealing to prevent a Lightning Bolt killing it, and then Brainstorming a lot, and then finally Fate Sealing to win. That I think is the most likely path to victory for Brian. I think Brian will be far ahead already. And, yeah. So, what's interesting with the Search that he just cast is that Wasteland can deal with Search. So, it's not as powerful in this matchup as it would be in others. So, I'm actually interested to see if Brian decides to keep it around as an enchantment or flip it. And Brian decides to flip it to, I guess, force the issue.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Nathan really doesn't need that many mana sources to deploy his threats, right? I mean, this thing caps out at 2 mana.
Right. Wasteland, helps cast Tarmogoyf. And if you're incredibly flooded, Force of Will, which does happen.
Yeah.
But most of the time, the deck wants to go to 2 mana and then use its additional fetch lands to brainstorm away dead lands into its deck. And then, it operates off two lands, 3 lands extremely efficiently. So probably what Nathan wants here to come back into this game is brainstorm at some point and then essentially play a fetch land and get his red source. However, yeah, Brian is just finning his deck of lands at this point. It's actually interesting that Brian decided to fetch twice, since that makes Brainstorm a little worse. So I'm curious as to why Brian decided to use his last fetch land, which could be used essentially for a future Brainstorm. I'm not sure I actually have an answer for that. I guess I want to see how this game develops, I guess, to have an answer to that question. And then here it's interesting that Nathan decides to force a will to search. I think Nathan realizes that he cannot beat Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, so he decides to here Wasteland the Azcanta to essentially pull ahead. But Brian finds another search for Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, which is quite fun. Right. So yeah, Brian is incredibly far ahead. I'd put Brian at if we had the advantage bar that exists at the Pro Tour.
where would you put it?
Like when it's red.
Yeah,
that's about where in Brian's favor.
Over towards Brian.
Right.
So I have an update, by the way. I've been kind of doing a little internet sleuthing here in the background, Eduardo,
Sure.
about the Seth Manfield judge call there. So what actually ended up happening was Seth has a Gideon Jura in his main.
Okay.
And he's got a Gideon ally of Zendikar in his board.
Right.
And what he did was, when he de-sideboarded, he mixed the two up.
Okay.
So Gideon Jura ended up being in his sideboard, where Gideon ally of Zendikar ended up being his main. So what he did was, he noticed it, and he called a judge on himself, which is what you're supposed to do when you notice that you've made a mistake. The penalty for this, in this case, is going to be a warning. Okay. It's called a deck problem. He's going to lose the card from his hand to make the deck game one legal, and the Gideon that wasn't supposed to be there is now gone, and then they'll shuffle in the one into his deck while keeping any known cards in place or whatever, and he'll receive a warning, but not a game loss.
Yeah. Like,
so what we're going to do is we're going to actually pop back over to the modern game, because
it ends.
There it is.
Yeah,
it ended anyway,
Nathan recognized that Jace was the end.
Right. And as you said before, the theoretical advantage bar was slammed over towards BBD anyway. Yep. So let's see where we're at here now. There's Snapcaster Mage on the battlefield. And what are we facing down here? Timothy has, he still has the Wood Elves, and he's got Hour of Promise, it looks like, on the stack here, I would assume.
Yes, I would believe that with two Valakuts in play, this is virtually a must counter for Seth. So if Seth has a counter spell, he probably has to deploy it, but it looks like Seth may not have it.
He's going to have to go for Field of Ruin on one of the Valakuts with Hour of Promise on the stack. Now, does that actually get the job done? Because Timothy can go get a Mountain. He still has a Valakut, though.
Right, but let's see. There's a Spreading Seas
Seth's
on the other
19.
Valakut. I think one of Seth's best routes to victory in this match is to destroy or get rid of every Valakut the Molten Pinnacle.
Okay.
So Seth has done the job of getting rid of two. The Spreading Seas on the current Valakut, and the one in the graveyard. So there's two Valakuts left.
But there's one left on the battlefield.
Yeah. There's the two Valakuts left on the battlefield.
Two left on the battlefield, yeah.
Those two are essentially Abbott's lines to victory. Without those, once those are gone, Seth has probably won the game.
Right, but tick-tock, right? Because Seth is now down to 13, and every Mountain's doing 6 damage.
Right, okay.
So this is going to be really tough, because now Seth is trying to race a deck that is explicitly designed to put lands into play with two Valakuts that are active?
Yeah. With the redundancy that the Valakut deck has, this is basically, I think, if Timothy has anything here, Abbott will win this turn.
His name's Timothy.
Oh, it is Timothy.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true. There we go.
Titan, and that'll get the job done. So Timothy Abbott does pick up game number 1. Yep. The good news for Seth, though, is even with that sideboarding gaff there, his teammates both won their game 1.
Yes.
So Frank Skarren, who's going to be playing Standard, it seems, is up a game over Alexander Wilson. And then the match we just saw with BBD, he's up a game as well over his opponent, Nathan.
Right. Yeah. BBD managing to basically control the early aggression, and then Nathan not being able to follow up meant that BBD could take all his time to just deploy, search for Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, Jace the Mind Sculptor.
I like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. As for Seth there, essentially Seth could not deal with the other Valakuts or have a counterspell. So Seth slightly routes to victory. Well, in this matchup with blue-white control versus Valakut, the cards that matter are every card that says target land, and basically anything that says counter target spell. Every other card is a lot less relevant. So now it's interesting to see what Timothy will bring in, essentially to counter, because Timothy knows that Seth's plan is going to be to disrupt through counter spells and land destruction, or land disruption, since Field of Ruin and Spreading Seas don't really destroy the lands.
No, but effectively get, for Valakut purposes, they're pretty effective.
So like how Timothy manages his Valakuts of the Molten Pinnacle, and when he deploys them in play is actually really crucial. One of the core things that Timothy can do is not deploy his Valakuts until the latest possible moment, which is counterintuitive because it's a come-into-play tap land. But then Seth can't really target the land with Spreading Seas, or targets a land of, let's say, less relevancy, and then Timothy can maybe get multiple Valakuts at the same time. But yeah, looking at the sideboards, Timothy has three extraordinarily spicy cards, free copies at least. There's a lot of different cards, but the cards you're going to care about are guttural responses. So there's two of those.
I remember that one.
Yeah. So green-red hybrid, counter-target blue instant spell.
Yep.
And Gaia's Revenge.
Oh, man.
Right.
Every control deck's nightmare.
Yeah. I can't remember the exact text.
I think it's an 8/5, right?
Right, but not just that. But it's important to know what Gaia's Revenge text is, because I'm wondering if Gideon...
it can't be countered, and it can't be the target of non-green spells or abilities from non-green sources.
Right, that's relevant because it means that Gideon of the Trials won't hurt it. Although Seth
it also has haste, by the way.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
But Gideon Ally of Zendikar is a good counter to it, since you can add 2/2. So... But then,
True.
How good is Gideon in his matchup is actually a question I would like to see answered too. I'm not 100% certain on that. Yeah, so...
Well, it looks like we're back underway here on our Legacy match, so why don't we jump over to that. We've got Skarren-Manfield-Braun-Duin up a game over Wilson-Abbott-Kahovec, and Nathan has, one of the dream starts for the deck. He's got the Delver of Secrets down here on turn 1. Occasionally you'll see the players play a Brainstorm on their upkeep to try to set up a Delver transform. They didn't do it this time, and it looks like he did not, in fact, transform the Delver.
Right. Well, that's fine. Nobody really plays Delver of Secrets for Delver of Secrets. They play it for Insectile Aberration. But there's a ton of instants and sources in the deck, so it's just a matter of time.
So it's not fine. It sucks. He wanted to transform that thing.
That's fine. Like you'll get there eventually.
All right.
Yeah.
You have more faith.
Yeah. I like that Nathan decided to wasteland Brian's BBD's Volcanic Island. I thought that, basically, when you're on the play, wasteland becomes so much better because you have the mana advantage that way. You're always up a land, and you get to cast your 1 mana spells while your opponent is playing catch-up and you're dealing damage. So I really like the Wasteland play here. And it set it up really nicely for the Stifle that I believe is in Nathan's hand, because...
Oh, that's a beating.
Yeah, so basically, what's going to happen here? BBD puts 2 cards on top, most likely draws 1, doesn't want to draw the other, is going to try to sack his fetch land and might get stifled. So BBD's play is most likely best by passing the turn here, unless he feels he needs to interact right now. But at least it uses up the mana from Nathan's side. So I like... He
did in fact pass the turn back.
Yeah.
And there it is. Ponder off the top of the library for Nathan's going to transform into Insectile Aberration. Now the clock's very real.
Yes.
We've seen how quick this type of card, one of the most efficient, aggressive cards ever printed.
Yeah.
It's just going to start chewing away huge chunks of Skarren-Manfield-Braun-Duin's life total turn after turn unless dealt with.
Right. Yeah, and now we have access to one of the most interesting parts I find of Legacy, the fetch land sequencing. So here we go. Here's what
this is the blowout. Here we go.
Right.
So right now, Skarren-Manfield-Braun-Duin says, I'm going to sacrifice my polluted delta. It's actually sacrificed as part of the cost of it,
yes.
So it's in the graveyard. He has an ability on the stack that says, go search up an island or a swamp. Nathan says, in response, I will do the same. But his is going to resolve first. He's decided to get himself a trop. And now he's going to get to fire off that Stifle that you mentioned, which is going to counter the triggered ability and mean that Brian does not get to get a land. That's 2 lands he's effectively dealt with through Wasteland and Stifle.
That was actually a really tough one because
beating.
Brian has access to Pyroblast in his hand, I believe. So one thing he could have done with the Ponder So he decided to go for it there so that Nathan would have a bit less value from his ponder. He couldn't like stack 3 cards, draw the card he wants, and then shuffle the 2 he doesn't want. However,
Oof. Did you see that, by the way?
What happened?
Brian had hit the second card off of his brainstorm was Terminus.
Oh,
so he just drew it.
Yeah, Brian really wanted to
He would have loved to go get a Tundra there.
Yeah, he really wanted to get rid of that second card, and this is like what we call being brainstorm locked. But one of the things Brian could have done was he could have not sacked his land, accepted that he was going to draw the Terminus, which isn't good in this spot. And then basically play his... he could also try to cast it, but he would get stifled anyways. But he could also try to play his second fetch land, sack the first fetch land. His opponent responds by sacking fetch land. Then Brian responds by sacking his fetch land, gets the land. Nathan tries to stifle the trigger, and then Brian responds with a Pyroblast.
See, for those of you that want to get into Legacy, it's easy.
Yeah, of course.
What
so
could go wrong?
it might have been correct to do so since Brian would be extraordinarily land light against a Stifle, and Brian needs his lands. Brian
great.
BBD cannot really operate without at least 3-4 lands, unlike Nathan.
Yeah, Nathan needs 1 or maybe 2.
Two is usually the sweet spot because then you get to cast Tarmogoyfs.
Right. He's actually on land number 3 now on the board. Right.
This is okay. What Nathan's going to do here is deploy a Fret. If he has if he has any interaction, he'll pass. If he doesn't, he would have deployed his Nimble Mongoose as well.
By the way, Nimble Mongoose.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a fan.
Oh yeah, that card.
I love that card.
Yeah, that card has that was one of my favorite cards when I actually started playing Magic.
Was it?
Yeah, I think that
was it out? Like
yeah. I mean, when I started was I played the old Blue Green Madness deck.
Oh no, wrong artwork. Oh no, the new Nimble Mongoose, the one. Come on.
We're playing Legacy. There we go.
Yeah, that's my guy right there.
Yes.
Therese Nielsen artwork.
Oh, I got a few signed ones at home.
Really?
Yeah, I traded a few of the ones I had, but I kept the signed ones.
I love that. Faster than a cobra's bite.
Yes. Well, it's definitely but the Tarmogoyf's a little bit of a faster clock at the moment, and yeah.
So you're saying a Tarmogoyf is faster than a cobra's bite?
Well, not quite. The Mongoose comes down quicker. You know, it costs 1.
Fair.
Yeah. By the way, so like for strategy purposes here, BBD is probably going to try to set up a Terminus, but
kind of the best he can do at this point, right? Get rid of both threats and try to stabilize.
Right. So he's going to go Terminus and then have a Pyroblast as backup. So that was the reason you might not want to
There's a Wasteland though.
Right. That's extremely strong here.
Yeah, that can take out BBD's only white source and really lock out that Terminus game plan.
Yeah, and Nathan should do that now. Yeah,
just
perfect.
Get rid of that.
Yeah, so BBD is going to draw.
Good clean Magic here in Legacy. Well, Wasteland, stifle your fetch. Who's having fun now?
I think it's clean Magic. Because
I love it.
BBD was trying to cast a 6-mana card for 1 mana, so I think it's totally fair that Nathan denies this opportunity.
I agree. There was nothing unfair about that. I'm sure Chad agrees with us.
The other interesting aspect of BBD being short-landed is that BBD was forced to get non-basics. One of the best ways that BBD has to essentially get away from Wasteland Stifle is to get basics in play. But because he got into this situation where Nathan short-landed him, he was forced to get dual lands. And because he got dual lands, that meant that Wasteland from Nathan was really strong. And now this Goyf
probably 4, right? Like
this creature land instant sorcery. So so BBD should be down to 1, right?
Yeah, he is. And that's Lightning Bolt on the stack with only white mana, nothing you can do. And Brian Braun-Duin going to lose game number 2 to Nathan. And we're going to get a game number 3 potentially here in our Legacy portion. Yeah. Kind of interesting. We got a chance to actually see both decks do what they wanted to do. We saw Jace the Mind Sculptor and Terminus in game 1 from BBD. And on the other side, we saw a lot of Wastelands and some cheap threats.
Yeah, if we see game 3, we're probably going to see the Blood Moons that BBD had stuck in hand actually be relevant since he'll be on the play.
On the play, sure.
So yeah.
Big moment here as we bump into our modern match, which is Primeval Titan going on the stack. And there's that Guttural Response.
There we go. We talked about Guttural Response. Seth most likely did not bring in his Dispel, since it would be really bad in this type of matchup. So this Guttural Response is most likely going to be good.
And that's probably game. I mean, whenever they resolve Primeval Titan, things go downhill very quickly for the opposing player.
Sure, but the interesting part here
wow, that fish is getting wrecked.
Yeah. And I think Seth got pretty much wrecked here, so that's fair.
Yeah.
But the two Valakuts that Prime Time, as we like to call him,
I do.
got, it's not quite game over. It just depends on what happens from here. Essentially, there's no damage because the Valakuts had to come into play. So what seems to have happened in this game is Seth was trying to deny Timothy early green mana. That seems to have not quite panned out.
Mm-hmm.
You can see with the spreading seas.
That's right.
With the two Stomping Grounds. And
Stomping
now
Ground and Cinderblade.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. And what's super interesting here as well is that you can see that Timothy timed his Valakuts to come into play later. And actually, I'm not sure what Seth's best removal is against Primetime. It's probably Seth kept in something to deal with Primeval Titan. I'm not sure, though, because Path to Exile is...
so
annoyingly
not good. I have pathed many a Primetime, and I'm like, why am I doing this with my life?
Yeah, and you really...
Like, it's better than taking 6 and losing the game the next turn, but not a lot better.
Right, and you usually don't want to keep it because giving your opponent a mountain is really a tragedy.
Yeah.
Right, but Seth needs an answer to Primeval Titan. I hope Seth did not just rely on Verdict.
Oh, Verdict and Cryptic.
Yeah, because if Seth just relies on counter magic to kill Titan, Seth's almost done. It just depends how Seth has boarded here. If Seth has not boarded a way to deal with a Primeval, or has boarded out all his ways to deal with Primeval Titan in play, then he's in very big trouble. There is a Detention Sphere in play, so I'm going to double check quickly how many copies of that he has, since that's one of his cleanest answers. He also has Rune Halo, so he has one Detention Sphere left and a Rune Halo, and those are the cards that Seth is really looking to.
By the way, you, not to interrupt you, but you see Detention Sphere has already been used on one of the more potent cards from Timothy as well.
Yes.
He's got his Prismatic Omen underneath it there
Yes.
as one of the more explosive cards that can just end the game so quickly.
Right. Prismatic Omen is a must deal with because the games go long, so it's almost impossible for Seth to stop the fact that a Valakut will come and a Valakut will win the game.
Right. We were mentioning earlier how Valakut doesn't do damage itself. Well, sometimes it does.
Yeah, with Prismatic Omen, you can win off Scape Shift for 6 lands, essentially getting your 4 Valakuts to whatever's and dealing... I don't even know how much damage. I'm sure I could calculate it, but it's not worth... You can, at home, you can calculate it. It is way more than lethal.
I have a computer in front of me, not good enough to run those kind of numbers. So this is Snapcaster Mage from Seth. Is he using it to tap down the Titan?
It depends. So most likely he's going to use it to tap down the Titan.
Oh, he's going to return.
Oh, this is a much more interesting
tap.
play. Return and tap is an incredibly interesting play. Seth's decided that essentially he cannot win a normal game against a Primeval Titan in play for too long. So he's going to bounce his Spreading Seas in order to deal with all these Valakuts.
Oh, but he has Scape Shift too, and there's Negate now from Seth Manfield.
Right, Negate. There were 2 Negates in Seth's board. They come in at perfect time.
That was a great back and forth, but Seth is not out of the woods yet.
No.
That Primeval Titan, sure, it got tapped down for the turn.
Yes.
But it's ready to rumble again next turn. So,
right. So
Seth still needs to find answers. I mean, he can't take out all 3 Valakuts.
You say that. There are 3 Fields of Ruins in play, and he has a Spreading Seas.
Okay.
So it's actually totally reasonable to deal with all 3 Valakuts. Actually, potentially this turn. Let's see.
You got my attention now, Eduardo.
Let's see. We use a Field of Ruin. So each Field of Ruin is 2 mana. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you get a basic land. Yes. So Seth could decide to triple Field of Ruin Timothy. The problem is that Timothy would get mountains in the interim. So Seth needs to essentially respond to his old Field of Ruins. And Seth can do that once. So Seth could destroy 2 Valakuts without Timothy being able to respond.
So he has the Spreading Seas for the 3rd.
Right, so this is actually really heads-up play by Seth. He basically Spreading Seas the Valakut, and what's most likely going to happen here, if this was probably what he planned all along, is he's going to crack Field of Ruin, targeting Valakut. In response to his Field of Ruin, target the other Valakut, and prevent a mountain from coming into play and dealing damage.
He should do that.
Well, that would be the optimal line. Unfortunately, it seems like...
he's actually going to take a little bit of damage here.
Yeah, so
he's only taking 3 though, right?
Right, or the Snapcaster Mage might die.
Sure.
Right. I think Timothy's better off aiming for the head.
But he has the answer here for the Primeval Titan. He plays Gideon Jura.
Right.
And we see why he didn't go for the other copy, because he wanted to have 5 mana available for Big Gideon.
Yes.
And he uses the -2 ability, destroy target tapped creature. Now the shields are down for Manfield, though. Timothy Abbott has the opening here, another Primeval Titan, something like that, to slam the door, but he's got to do it now.
Right, yeah. That makes a lot more sense, because otherwise, yeah, Seth would have definitely used the Field of Ruins. There's actually, what's actually kind of interesting here is Seth's, as you say, the shields are down. One thing that Seth could have done, I'm not sure which line is better, is he could have gone for the double Field of Ruin play, let Timothy attack with the Primeval Titan.
I'm getting scared just thinking about it.
Right. But there's only one Valakut in play.
By the way,
yes.
Scape Shift's on the stack now, Eduardo.
Well, that's basically bad news.
Yeah, he also played a Cinderglade first, which triggered the Valakut.
Yeah.
Knocked Seth down to 8. He should be able to find enough mountains just to kill Seth here, right?
Yeah. 3 mountains is more
That's
than
not
as
a
you
problem.
say. Yeah. It's I think the game has ended here. But on the other line, like Seth could have basically destroyed the 3 Valakuts, known that the Primeval Titan wouldn't have attacked, accepted to take damage. But at 11 plus 6, I think that would have been lethal. So that makes sense as to why Seth wouldn't have gone for that line. Seth would have lost.
Do it.
Yeah.
That is Timothy Abbott picking up his match 2-0 over Seth Manfield. And and it looks like, wow, it looks like this match has also ended. This was going to be our decider, but I think that Nathan, so what happened is Brian Braun-Duin cast Blood Moon, the card that you mentioned at the end of the last game, and apparently Nathan scooped to it. He said, I can't beat it.
Yeah, that's the big difference between being on the player draw with Wasteland and Stifle, is when your opponent can go fetch land, say basic island, you are super far behind because your whole strategy revolves around you being able to disrupt your opponent's mana. And if your opponent goes fetch basic, then you're super far behind.
Well, it looks like that's exactly what happened here. From Brian's perspective, he's like Blood Moon, and Nathan's like GG. So they win the match. Or the round, I should say. That's Frank Skarren, Seth Manfield, and Brian Braun-Duin improving to 3-0 here in the early stages here in Grand Prix Santa Clara. We'll be back with more Magic after these messages.